Well, our big focus, Chinese leader Xi Jinping and our Prime Minister held their first formal talk since 2019, a sign of thawing relations after years of acrimony. Both said they should address their differences peacefully. In fact, Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping met on the sidelines of the 16th BRICS summit that was held in Russia, marking their first formal meeting in 5 years. The two nations have now exchanged maps detailing their respective perceptions of the boundary in the central sector, which includes Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. In fact, a boundary in Sikkim is largely agreed upon, but China has yet to engage on boundaries in Arunachal Pradesh and Ladakh. But the key developments include patrolling arrangement for troops along the line of actual control, disengagement from remaining friction points, whether it's in eastern Ladakh, and the revival of bilateral relations through dialogue mechanisms. In fact, the Ministry of External Affairs has said that they welcome the recent agreement for complete disengagement and resolution of issues that arose in 2020 in the India-China border areas. For further clarity, we have with us Strategic Affairs expert Brahma Chellaney joining us. Thank you so much, sir, as always, for making time for us. Now, interestingly, sir, the Indian press release mentions the agreement for complete disengagement and resolution of issues that arose in 2020 in the India-China border areas. But echoing the Chinese Foreign Ministry, the Chinese spokesperson has noted simply that the two leaders commended the important progress the two sides had recently made through the intensive communication on resolving the relevant issues in the border areas. The same talking points had been also posted by the Chinese ambassador, but neither of the Chinese officials have used the term agreement, which has been used specifically by India. So what does this indicate, and how do you see this latest development?
No, you're right. The Chinese have been cryptic. In fact, India unilaterally announced this quote-unquote new patrolling arrangement with China. The Chinese took more than a day to comment on the Indian announcement, and their terse comment did not mention any new patrolling arrangement with India. In fact, they refrained from talking about the military standoff between the two countries. They refrained from mentioning the border crisis. They only talk in very general terms. And I think even last evening when the two leaders met, Modi mentioned the understanding with China in his opening statement, but Xi Jinping made no mention of that. So I think all that indicates that the perceptions of the two, despite the so-called understanding have been reached, the perceptions remain quite different.
So many experts highlight that it is important not to confuse the disengagement at the LAC for a resolution. But in a broader sense, some argue that this also opens up diplomatic space for Delhi as it seeks to find a balance between Russia and the West. And with the US presidential election less than a fortnight away, would you argue that this also gives Delhi more cards to play with as it deals with the next White House occupant?
A potential thaw with China will increase India's international leverage, given how the US in particular has worked against India's regional interests, whether in Bangladesh, Myanmar, Pakistan. We have seen the US far from working with India, working against India's regional interests. And I think the way the US policy pushed Russia closer to China, now US policy is also pushing India to engage in a potential thaw with China. I say potential because the thaw process has just begun. It'll be a long process, and I think that it'll be also a difficult process given China's hegemonic ambitions in Asia, given the underlying Sino-Indian strategic rivalry. All said, India's effort to pursue a balanced foreign policy approach will certainly get a small boost or a significant boost from its efforts to mend fences with China. And similarly, China is facing long-term structural constraints at home, including a deepening demographic crisis, stalling economic growth, slowing productivity, but also it's facing a Western pushback against its geopolitical ambitions. So for China, too, better relations with India will help to advance its own larger geopolitical objectives.
As always, Mr. Chellaney, thank you so much for joining us with your insights on NDTV World.